Welcome to the rant.
When they had the pitch invaders for the soccer, what happened? What was the footage?
What happened was it was 10 minutes into the game, and the commentators were like, "Oh, we've got word that four of the players on pitch have broke COVID restrictions and didn't do the quarantine like they were supposed to." Um, they that the federal police and their federal over in Brazil, because it was being played in Brazil, so it was four Argentinian players that play in the Premier League, had flown from the UK to Brazil to play the game, the qualifiers, and didn't do what they were supposed to, like quarantine properly. And so they pulled the players off, and like Brazil and Argentina have some of the biggest players in soccer. You've got Messi, you've got Neymar, you've got the goalie Romero, you've got Danilo, and you've got all these guys that are big names, and they're all just standing on the pitch bemused, didn't know what was going on, and they stood there for 10 or 15 minutes waiting to see if they were going to keep playing, and then they abandoned the match. They said they weren't.
Did they actually explain what it was that
Yeah,
they didn't follow?
yeah, but because they took the four players off, if they would have replaced the four players, Argentina wouldn't have had any more subs for the whole game, and they didn't want to do that. They wanted an extra four subs, which they're under UEFA rules, you're not allowed to. The last 10 days, or I think it's been, we've had the Paralympics on, and seeing how much those athletes have to go through as Paralympians just to get, and the backstories of how they became, how how they got injured, and it was really good to watch. The Aussies done okay. It wasn't their best Olympics, but they still won 21 gold. The Aussies got 80 medals, where they were predicted to get they were predicted to get 100 to 110, but they only got 80 because there's a lot of countries that come through and surprised them in marathons and out on the track and field and stuff.
When you were watching the women's Gaelic as well, there was something special about one of those teams. What was it?
The underdogs team Mater came through and beat Dublin, who were outright favourites to win the final, and they beat them 1 goal to 11 goal, 1 goal to 11 behinds. And Dublin scored 12 1 pointers, but they lost because they didn't get the goal in the net. Well, under the COVID rules over there, they're only allowed to have it 50% full. So the stadium, I think they had about 20,000 people in there. They love Gaelic football over there. They'll follow anything. And we've had the US Open on. Both sides of the draws, there's been some big upsets. With especially in the women's side of the draw, you've got Naomi Osaka, Barty, Simona Halep all gone out of the draw, which they were the top three favourites to win it. So it'll be the first time, I think, in 4 years that they've had a different winner in the US Open Women's. You've still got Djokovic. Tsitsipas got beat the other day. Zverev's still there. But I think the one that's going to be there at the end, it'll be either Djokovic and Medvedev, who's a really good player from Russia. I think he's the only one that'll challenge on the men's side, but the women's side's really open. The top four in the world are gaunt, so it's open. Like you've got Swiatek, you've still got Bencic, you've got an American girl, the American girl that knocked off Barty, that they reckon could go through. She's looking really fit, and yeah, it's going to be good to watch. I think that's over. The finals will be Sunday and Monday morning our time. The last 2 years, a lot of the top seeds aren't playing as many tournaments because of COVID. Especially Barty. Last year, she only played 2 tournaments the whole year. Like Kyrgios, Dimonor, all the even the European players, they were restricted because of COVID. But I think that when they're going to the countries in Europe and England and that, they're still not able to train as much as they used to because they're still under quarantine rules and stuff. So I think that's opened up both sides of the draw really well. We had the Socceroos play earlier. I think it was on Saturday morning. They beat China to continue their winning form in the Asian qualifiers. You had Portugal. They were down 1-0 and Ronaldo broke the goal scoring record for the highest ever international goals by anyone. He came and scored a double in the last 5 minutes of the game and got Portugal over the line. England, they beat two teams that they should have beat, but they'll start singing over in England, the cup's coming home. But Italy's not. I don't think they're playing great. There's still a few teams I think that are recovering from the Euros, and the players having to travel from their competitions from all over Europe and having to travel to and from isn't helping. But you had Spain win this morning. You had Bulgaria. Got teams that younger players in the Premier League and the German Bundesliga are coming through and making them successful. NRLW was cancelled because there's a high amount of their players still in New South Wales and in New Zealand that couldn't get. They could go to Queensland, but they had to do 2 weeks quarantine, and then by the time they had to play, they would have only had 7 days of training. Where when the NRL went up there, the players didn't have to quarantine. They just went straight in and played. So the Queensland government, I hate to say it, but they're playing favourites. The women should have got the same quarantine rules as what the men did. But the NRL have compromised and given them two comps to play next year. One before the NRL starts to give them their standalone, and then one during the finals of the NRL next year as well. I think V'landys and Abdo tried as much as they could, but you can't get through to the complete nut job of a premier they got up there. So she's letting sports people in, but not letting families that, like, they had a 3-year-old boy last week that they made stay with the grandparents for a whole week, but she goes and lets all the families of the NRL men's players in, but won't, like last year, she let all the rich people in for the AFL through going in on yachts and stuff into the Gold Coast. So she's all about collecting the money and not worrying about the health of families and people. I've been watching a bit of the golf. We had they had a player over the weekend, first at a tournament over in the US, scored first ever ace on a hole. So an ace is where they hit it off the tee, and it's like a hole in one, but it literally lands on the green, one bounce and straight into the hole. I think he got a brand new car or something for doing it. So, but our Aussie Cameron Smith he's done well at his last few tournaments. Adam Scott, after this year, looks like he's going to transfer over to the seniors tournament. So, let's talk about the West Tigers.
Oh no! Let's not.
Yeah. Well, the NRL finals start this week, and one of the biggest rivalries since 2000, like the early 2000s, comes back up in the first week of the finals, Manly-Melbourne. And yeah, with the way Manly's been playing since Tommy Turbo and they've got their whole team DCE and ones like that back and the wingers and all that in form. That could be an upset, but it all just depends on if Melbourne have Adokar and Munster come back in. The only one in the bottom four I think's got a chance that may have a chance is the Roosters or Para. The other two are just they're making up numbers. Penrith are looking. If you look at the way Manly and Penrith are actually playing, they're playing the same style of football. They pretty much three forwards up and then straight out to the wings and try and spread the other team's defence. If Manly knock off Melbourne or Penrith lose, I don't think Penrith are going to lose to the Rabbitohs, but if the top three play the way they are, it's going to be hard to see. Well, I'd like to see Manly there, like to see Manly win this week, and then that puts Penrith and Melbourne on the same side of the draw, so that puts out them being able to play in the grand final. So the way the NRL finals work is if they lose first week, they swap to the opposite side of the draw. So, if Manly win, they play Roosters second week. If they lose, they play the Roosters. So we should have a good run there. This week just gone was week 2 of the AFL. Melbourne and Port Adelaide won their games in the first week to go through to the preliminaries. This week it was Geelong and GWS, and Geelong, their midfield pretty much, how would you say, their experienced midfield won them the game. Then you had Tom Hawkins, you've got Rowan, who was traded from Sydney to Geelong, had a big game. And then you had the Saturday night game, Brisbane Lions and Western Bulldogs, and the Lions were up at three-quarter time by 32 points and lost on the from a goal after the siren, and the Western Bulldogs go through to play Port Adelaide, and Geelong play Melbourne. But
do you think anyone in Perth is still watching the AFL?
They got nearly 50,000 people at the game, two teams at GWS and Geelong, and this week's sold out Melbourne Geelong. And Adelaide Oval's pretty much sold out too, because with the COVID restrictions in Sydney and Melbourne, they can't play any games in Melbourne, and they've moved the grand final to Perth for the second year in a row. They've had to move the grand final from the MCG. The Wallabies played there on the weekend and played the third Bledisloe over there on the weekend and got beat. They had 60,000 people turn up to watch. Well, that's like State of Origin, but for rugby union, the big rivalry. It was a good game until about the last 15 minutes, and the All Blacks, it ended up being 38-21, but the All Blacks only pulled away with it in the last 15 minutes. They had their fullback sent off because he lifted his boot up into Korobidi, who used to be a rugby league player. Lifted the boot studs up straight into his face, and so for the All Blacks to hold on with a player down still shows that they're the team to beat. T20 World Cup's coming up in another 4 weeks. Everyone's worried about how the Aussies are going, but they got to realise we've got 7 players sitting back in Australia that didn't even go and play. We've got the Ashes coming up in 2 months. And there's a big kind of argument going on at the moment because the England players want to bring all their families out, and the International Cricket Board have said no, you're not allowed under the COVID rules. You can bring your wife, but you got to find somewhere if you got kids, because they don't want to be bringing COVID out from the UK into Australia. So they've got five tests they're playing. England are playing India at the moment, and that tonight, day 5 of the third test is on, and if India win it, they take it to to a fourth test where it'll be decided who wins the series. Coming up in the next 2 weeks, the US Open men's and women's final. The Premier League, all the European soccer starts back up next Saturday after the international break. The NRL finals, AFL finals, the first week of the NRL preliminary finals in the AFL. You've got baseball coming to the end of the season. You've got the golf where Cam Smith, our Aussie guy, is in second spot in the FedEx lead rankings, and he's only got to win one more tournament and he can, I think it's a $30 million prize pool if he gets first. The cricket, you got Ronaldo making his debut for Man United against Newcastle this Saturday night, which I was reading today. They've already sold $60 million worth of his number 7 Man United 7 jerseys. You've got Basketball World Cup, the FIBA World Cup coming up. It's just sport everywhere. The one player I can't stand in international cricket is Virat Kohli. He's always been one of those players that comes across as arrogant and stubborn, and he hasn't. He was losing it in the last test in England where they were playing. He hasn't scored 100 in 3 tests. He's just become one of those players that no one likes anymore. If you don't want to play at the Olympics, don't go. She loses on the weekend to a 18-year-old Canadian girl that outplayed her all over the court, and now she's taken a break from tennis because the way I look at it, she can't cope with losing. And you look at Ash Barty, the world number 1, you look at Hallett, you look at players like that, they go to a press conference and say, we lost, we were outplayed in the match. They don't use excuses to why they lost. Latrell Mitchell went at the beginning of last season, went from the Roosters to South, which are the big rivals, and ever since he's gone, he was a good player at the Roosters. He's a good player at South, but he just gets too cocky and thinks that he's the best player in the comp. And now he's been suspended for a hit that was dirty, high, reckless. The guy that he hit, Joey Manu, has had to have nearly his whole left side of his face plates in it. And he got his 6 weeks for it, and now he's left the Queensland bubble and run back to Taree because he thinks the NRL are picking on him again.
I have no idea how he knows all this stuff.
Because all he does all day is watch sport.